intentions. So these 3 weeks are marked by remembering not just the tragedy, but the why behind the tragedy. What prompted these 3 weeks to be, instead of being joy and a gift and a promise, which what was God's original intention for them to be, they ended up being judgment and a time of testing, because God was provoked by Israel's response. So this time is traditionally set to remind Israel of 2 specific provocations: the golden calf and the provocation or evil report. So both of these events would have been blessings to Israel. Both of these would have been, God would have been giving the marriage covenant to Israel. The written, remember, they on Shavuot, the first Pentecost, Shavuot, the people said, I do, but we can't stand God's voice. It's too much. We're going to die. He's too much. Moses, you go, you be our representative. You go up the mountain, you meet with God, and whatever he says, we will do. So he's gone for 40 days. Now notice there was some back and forth before he left. It's 50 days by the time he came back, because he's on the mountain for 40 days. But he went back and forth like 3 times before he went up by himself. He went up with the 70 elders and they ate with Jesus. Remember, we went through all this before. There's more time period there than what it seems. And so he goes up, and he was going to come back down with the marriage contract, and they were going to get married. But they were playing the harlot. Instead of being ready for marriage, they were playing the harlot with the golden calf. And so instead of the golden calf, they would have been married when Moses returned. And instead of 40 years wandering in the desert, they would have entered into the promised land 1 year later. They would have entered into the promised land if they had just trusted God. Now, tradition has these 2 events separated by 3 weeks. But now we've seen that there's evidence that they could have actually occurred on the same date, that they could have both occurred in the month of Av. But either way, the pattern remains. Many evils have befallen Israel between the straits. These 3 weeks, there's this pattern of the building of a tragedy that will commence on the 9th of Av. So starting the 17th of Tammuz, and this name itself speaks of an idol. The name Tammuz, if you guys remember the many studies we've done on Babylon, Tammuz is the sun god, and the sun, S-O-N, God. Because remember, it was Nimrod, the grandson of Noah, who built Babylon and propped himself up to be a god. And his wife, Semiramis, the queen of heaven, to where they started the first world government and world religion in opposition to God. And Nimrod died, and Semiramis, wanting to still stay in power, made up this story about having an immaculate conception where the sun's rays impregnated her, and Tammuz, the sun god, was born. That's why you have all these ancient statues and ancient paintings of the Queen of Heaven, the Virgin with a baby, before Jesus was ever born, because God told us from the beginning that it would be a virgin birth. Right from Eve, he said it would be the seed of woman. And so Satan's smart. He knows, okay, well, women don't have a seed. That's a virgin birth. And he got ahead of it. And so we have this counterfeit Trinity going all the way back to Babylon. And it's the same counterfeit that's woven its way throughout Israel, woven its way through the world governments, the entire time, from the head of Babylon and the statue that we see in Daniel to today. It's always been there. And so it's interesting here that this month is named Tammuz. And that name actually came from Israel's captivity in Babylon, they changed the name of this month to Tammuz. And so we see a picture of this, of Tammuz, and how, the name itself is a provocation to God. Ezekiel 8, this is when God met with Ezekiel and he made the case. He told Ezekiel why Israel, why Judah is going to go into captivity to Babylon, why he's going to do this in the first place. He said the reason that this is happening is because of what they're doing. And this is what he told him. He took him to the temple and he showed him this in Ezekiel 8. Again, he told me, you will see them committing even greater abominations. And then he brought me to the entrance of the northern gate to the house of the Lord. And I saw women sitting there weeping for Tammuz. And I'm sorry, that should be 8:13 through 14, not 130 through 14. That doesn't even make sense. So, but here he brought him to the temple. He's at the gate, and there are women sitting there weeping for Tammuz. Now, weeping for Tammuz is a 40-day period of fasting for the sun god Tammuz. 40 days sounds kind of similar, right? Because again, people are practicing paganism today unto God, not realizing where it came from, not realizing where these ancient things came from, because it's not in the Bible. And so weeping for Tammuz is a slap in the face of God. He said, my spirit will not stay in the temple because of what they're doing. And then another part of this, Semiramis, the queen of heaven, we see in Jeremiah 7:17 through 19. Do you not see what they are doing in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The sons gather wood, the fathers light the fire, the women knead the dough to make cakes for the queen of heaven. Let's just pause here. How many people today think the queen of heaven is Mary? She's not. The queen of heaven is Semiramis. Queen of heaven is the ancient goddess, the female deity, the divine feminine, the lie that goes all the way back to Babylon. And Mary would be appalled to be called by that pagan title. So again, they make cakes for the queen of heaven. They pour out drink offerings to other gods to provoke me to anger. But am I the one they are provoking, declares the Lord? Is it not themselves they spite to their own shame? And today, again, people make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, thinking that they are doing a custom in Catholicism. That even happens in churches today. People are doing it thinking that they're honoring tradition, but they're actually honoring something that was done to foreign gods that provokes God to anger. And God says they're doing it to their own shame. They're hurting themselves by doing this. And so there's still Tammuz worship today. It's the false Jesus. And he's everywhere. Remember, the Jesus that the world loves, that's not the Jesus of the Bible, because Jesus tells us that the world hates him. The false Jesus, the son of Semiramis, the queen of heaven. We have discussed this Babylonian origin of false worship many times, and there's nothing new under the sun. Israel did those things then, and they received judgment. The tribulation will be the full cup of wrath on Mystery Babylon. Remember, she's holding that cup of wrath, and it's going to be full. This ancient system that's been there all throughout time is going to finally be dealt with.